Tonight, millions of people will lie in bed with the blue light from their screens still shining into their eyes. They will keep scrolling through one more video, replying to a few more messages, or telling themselves they will stay awake for just 5 more minutes before going to sleep. Some people will drink coffee even though it has already been dark outside for hours. Others will stare silently at the ceiling, even as their bodies are so exhausted they can barely keep their eyes open any longer. But there is something very strange about modern humans. We are perhaps the only species that tries to resist its own sleep. Your body was never designed to live like this. For almost all of human history, when the sun went down and darkness covered the savannah, humans did not stay awake late to work, entertain themselves, or stare into artificial light. They gathered around fires, sat close together for warmth, and listened to the sounds coming from somewhere beyond the darkness, where predators moved through the night in ways human eyes could barely see. For your ancestors, the night was not a time to conquer the world. The night was the most fragile part of the day, and sleep was not laziness. It was part of survival. When the sun disappeared beyond the horizon and the last light faded into the vast savannah, the world changed instantly. The daytime belonged to humans, but the night belonged to predators. In that darkness were hyenas, leopards, and eyes that could see through the night far better than any human could. Your ancestors had no claws to defend themselves, no sharp fangs, and they could not run faster than the creatures wandering out there. When night fell, the human body became more vulnerable than ever, so they did the only thing they could do to survive. They gathered around fire. Children slept close beside their parents on the cold, hard ground of the savannah. The adults lay in a circle around glowing embers that still burned faintly, enough to keep them warm and push the darkness back a few more feet. Beyond that firelight was almost complete darkness, where even the smallest sound could make the entire tribe wake in alarm. For primitive humans, sleep was not a relaxing feeling like we think of it today. It was an extremely dangerous state. A sleeping human could not run, could not fight, and could not see whatever was moving closer through the darkness. That is why your ancestors did not sleep alone. They slept beside one another, close enough to feel each other's breath and body heat. Because for hundreds of thousands of years, sleep was not just rest. It was a shared vulnerability that the entire tribe experienced together beneath a small fire surrounded by endless darkness. At night, the entire tribe lay close together around glowing embers that still burned faintly. The small flames flickered in the wind, casting distorted shadows across the dry ground of the savannah, while above them stretched an endless sky filled with stars. Children slept beside their parents, and the adults lay in a circle as close to the fire as possible, because that warmth did not only protect them from the cold of the night, it was also the only boundary between humans and the darkness beyond. Just a few feet farther away, the world almost completely disappeared. No one knew what was moving out there. There were only the sounds of insects, the wind brushing through dry grass, and sometimes a noise that made the entire tribe fall silent for a few seconds in fear. But even so, they still slept, not because they felt safe, but because eventually the body could no longer stay awake. And strangely enough, ancient humans probably did not sleep the way we do. For most of human history, sleep was often divided into two parts. They slept for the first few hours after dark, then woke up in the middle of the night in a state of almost eerie silence. Someone would sit up beside the fading embers, watching the small flames flicker in the darkness. Everyone else around them was still asleep. There were no cars, no phones, no sound except the faint crackling of fire in the vast night. And in that silence, humans began to think about the dreams they had just seen, about tomorrow, about the next hunt, about the people they loved lying beside them in the darkness. Perhaps it was one of the most primitive states humans ever experienced, a kind of quiet wakefulness suspended somewhere between sleep and survival. Then eventually, the sky began to change color. The cold air of the night slowly gave way to the first light of dawn. The embers were stirred back into flame. People rose from the cold, hard ground, brushed the dust from their bodies, and prepared for another day of traveling long distances in search of food and water. For your ancestors, sleep was never about escaping life. Sleep was about giving the body enough strength to survive one more day in a world that was never truly safe. But sleep does not exist simply because humans get tired. It exists because the human brain needs it to survive. While you sleep, the brain does not actually shut off the way many people think it does. It begins doing a different kind of work. The memories from the day are reorganized. Stressful emotions are processed. The body repairs muscles, restores energy, and prepares for the next day. Even dreams may be part of that process. And in the primitive world, all of this mattered far more than it does today. A sleep-deprived human out on the savannah did not just feel tired. They reacted more slowly. They could not hear subtle sounds in the grass. They threw spears less accurately. They became more likely to panic, more easily distracted, and more likely to make deadly mistakes when facing danger. In the modern world, lack of sleep might make you sluggish during a meeting the next morning. But for most of human history, a sleepy human was a human more likely to die. That is why your body still forces you to sleep, no matter how hard you try to resist it. The heaviness in your eyes at midnight, the exhaustion after staying awake for too many hours, or the drowsiness that appears when darkness falls. All of these are extremely ancient signals. Your brain is still operating according to a world that existed hundreds of thousands of years before the invention of the light bulb. The problem is that the modern world no longer resembles the world your body was designed to survive in. And perhaps that is why more and more people feel exhausted, even though they have never truly had to survive the way their ancestors did. For most of human history, darkness was the signal for the body to rest. When the sun disappeared, the temperature dropped, fires were lit, and the entire tribe slowly drifted into silence. The human brain evolved within that rhythm for hundreds of thousands of years, but the modern world has disrupted almost that entire natural cycle. Tonight, countless people will continue staring into the blue light of their phone screens for hours longer, even though their bodies are already exhausted. They will drink more coffee to stay awake, scroll through hundreds of images and short videos in silence, then lie down in bed with a brain that still does not fully understand that the day is over. The problem is that your brain cannot distinguish between light from the sun and light from a screen. When light reaches your eyes at midnight, an ancient part of the brain still believes that night has not fully arrived. It delays melatonin, disrupts the circadian rhythm, and keeps the body alert far longer than its natural state was designed for. That is why so many people feel tired all day but still cannot sleep when night comes. Their bodies want to rest, but their brains still believe they need to stay awake. Then the next morning, we continue fighting exhaustion with caffeine, with bright artificial light, with another day of forcing ourselves to function beyond what the body naturally wants. And slowly, exhaustion becomes so normal that modern humans almost forget their bodies were once designed to live differently. Your brain is still the brain of a hunter-gatherer who once slept around a fire beneath a sky full of stars. But the world around you is no longer that world. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans ended their days beneath a sky full of stars, beside the people they trusted and a small fire that kept the darkness outside. They had no electricity, no cities glowing through the night, no screens keeping the brain constantly alert. When darkness fell, their bodies slowly slowed down along with the world around them, and then they slept. Not because they were lazy, not to escape life, but because sleep was the body's way of saying it wanted to survive one more day. Perhaps that is what modern humans have forgotten. We live in a world that is never completely dark, never truly silent, and almost never stops moving. But deep inside, your brain still carries instincts shaped by a far older world where a small fire in the middle of the night was once the only thing that made humans feel safe. And maybe every time you feel sleepy after dark, it is not the weakness of the body. Maybe it is simply hundreds of thousands of years of evolution gently reminding you that humans were never meant to stay awake alone in the middle of the night for too long. And what about you? Does your body truly need to stay awake a little longer, or is it simply trying to live against the way humans have existed for hundreds of thousands of years?